Uninviting someone we never actually invited in the very first place. So my fiancé, 34 male, Mike, has an acquaintance Jen, female, early 30s. It's looking like we'll have to uninvite her, though she was never actually invited to our wedding to begin with. We know Jen through mutual friends, but in our wider social circle, she's on the fringe for a series of things that happened years before we were around, but they weren't great. Jen is in a relationship that's pretty serious. They're moving in together. Despite that, she's made it very clear that she has a crush on Mike. There was a period of time where she was text bombing Mike constantly. On the most active day, she sent him 50+ messages. She was trying to flirt in places. He responded to hardly any of it, letting her know that he was busy at work and didn't have time to talk. Mike does not reciprocate these feelings and declined any sort of in-person one-on-one interaction when she asked to meet up for drinks after work, alone. He shared the message threads with me because he saw the red flags and didn't want to end up in a situation where there was any room for doubt. When things were less obvious and awkward, she tried to arrange double date nights, but we generally made excuses and declined. The one time we went out with them on a double date, she made an ass of herself at the restaurant by a gross display of PDA with her partner and trying to dive into sex talk with kids within earshot at the table next to us. All of us, including her partner, let her know that we weren't comfortable with where she was pushing the conversation, and she pouted and said that we weren't any fun. Yes, she had been drinking. She made a big show of wanting to be girlfriends with me to my face, with Mike present, but I've never heard from her once, and she hasn't made any effort. I have no idea what her partner knows about or thinks of all of this. This past weekend, we learned that Jen has been telling others in our social circle that she's invited to our wedding when she never was, and is asking about our gift registry. We don't have one. We're having a tiny ceremony with less than 10 people present and a bigger, catered party, but the guest list is still less than 50. Based on cost and our friend's backyard, isn't enough to comfortably host more than that. But even if we weren't having an intentionally tiny wedding, she still would not be invited because neither of us consider her an actual friend. She's hurt that she wasn't invited to his stag party, which is just a board game night, but she was never a consideration. She's also complained that I overlooked her when having a shower or the bachelorette. I didn't even have a shower because we already own a home and are established, and I have zero reason to invite her to anything because we're not friends and she's been disrespectful. 2 separate friends let us know that Jen is telling this tale. One of them tried to understand why she's lying about this by keeping it breezy and playing dumb, but she kept evading answering questions about it. My guess is that she's telling people all of this for 2 reasons. 1, she believes that she and Mike are friends and her feelings are hurt, and 2, she's possibly trying to ferret out the details and location of the ceremony and the party. We generally don't think anyone that we invited would share this information with her, given the general history in the social group. There's a chance that she could manipulate it out of someone though. Needless to say, we think we've gotten to the point where we need to have a direct conversation with Jen over text, so there's no confusion that she's not invited, and what she's doing is just, well, bizarre. We don't think we need to tell anyone connected to the wedding locations that she is specifically not invited at this moment, but we will if we need to. We mostly think that she won't try to show up anyway. After the conversation, the plan is to block her on social media and messaging platforms. Is this unhinged? Yes. Should I have to devote any energy or time to a 30-something-year-old woman who behaves this way? No. Is this totally absurd? Yes. Does she need serious help? Definitely yes. In the comments, I would nip this in the bud. No more hanging out, no more texting, even block and delete. But I would first tell her that she is not invited. Maybe along the lines of, I need to clear something up. We were told that you have been saying that you were invited to our wedding. We do not want you to be embarrassed, but there is no invitation. Do not apologize or make excuses. Just, you are not invited. It is clear and to the point. Block and delete right after that. OP says, oh, believe me, we haven't hung out directly with her since early 2024. When we do see her, which is rare, it's at birthday parties or other mutual social circle gatherings. She tried to organize a few more double dates after the first one, but we just kept politely declining. Mike hasn't blocked her, and I haven't blocked her because I think that we both thought that she would get over this and move on, and if we gave it any attention, it would encourage her. Obviously, we were wrong. But yeah, otherwise, we're totally on the same page. We just never thought that we'd have to have this conversation with anyone. Another commenter says, "You're going to have to be blunt, and frankly, it would be best if it comes from your fiancé. Can he do it?" OP says, "He's willing to, wants to, and suggested it. He wants me present for the conversation, but he wants to lead it. We both like the idea of being a united front and there being no questions that this message is coming from the both of us. I don't really plan on saying much to her. I could get loud and insulting, I guess, but it'll just feed into a label about being the territorial, jealous partner. I genuinely don't think that it matters what I do. She's going to label me however she wants, and I can't control it. The people that know us and love us in our friend circle know the both of us. So I'm not too concerned about perceptions about being poorly received. If anything, she is and has been for a while. The home-wrecking vibe is new, but is not surprising." Another commenter says, "I would make it known to the group that she is not invited, never was, and anyone who hears her saying something to the contrary is welcome to clear it up for her. This woman is causing drama for the fun of it, and people are allowing her just to keep the peace." OP says, "It's true, and that's our fault. We also just didn't think that it would go this way. Most of our friends, especially our close friends, don't act this way, and she's so outside of our daily sphere that it just didn't occur to us that there was more brewing in the background." I will always understand people being non-confrontational and wanting to avoid things, but come on, it's your wedding, and she's making such a fuss that you really can't avoid this one. I also understand coming to Reddit and being like, "Hey guys, so this is what she's doing, this is what we know so far. What do you reckon, guys? What do we do?" First off, thank you for outsourcing the problems to Reddit. I always respect that. Secondly, take the comments' advice and just do it head on. Stop avoiding it. I don't know why you didn't think it would go this way. What about her and everything you know about her and her backstory made you think, this will be the exception. She's going to be different this time. And you said most of our friends, especially our close friends, don't act this way? Yeah, and there's a reason that she's not your close friend and she's not in those friendship circles like you guys are. Specifically because she's unhinged. I don't think the hinges were on the doors to begin with. My only question here is, why are you taking so long to do something about this? She's obviously in the wrong, and the longer that she gets to spin the narrative in the background, the more people she'll get on side. There's just some people that love nothing more than causing chaos around weddings and messing with the people getting married. I'll never understand it, but some people just cannot handle not being in the spotlight. And now, onto the update. It's been a while to get back to this. I'm not terribly active on Reddit, and summer has been really busy on top of the final detail planning around the wedding. A while back, I posted about having to uninvite my soon-to-be husband's, 34 male, acquaintance Jen, even though she was never invited and would never be invited. The background context is that Jen was interested in Mike and making it pretty obvious, despite being in a committed relationship herself. Mike wasn't interested back, and in the interest of not embarrassing Jen, thought that if he kept politely showing no reciprocation, that she would let the crush run its course and then move on. Instead, she started telling mutual friends a made-up story that we had invited her when we hadn't. And also, complaining that she had never been invited to the stag or bachelorette parties, despite a lack of friendship with either of us. We weren't all that concerned about her crashing the wedding, which is still several months now, but replies to my original post did press us on both that we should actually be more concerned. We did take those comments to heart and set up measures with vendors to prevent her attempt to meddle with aspects of the wedding. The owner of the venue, which is just our friend's backyard, agrees that she likely won't show up, especially now, But he has various things in place to monitor the situation, including voice and movement-activated home security cameras on the property that would alert him if she showed up at the bottom of the driveway. The way the house, yard, etc. are configured, she doesn't really have another option to get in but through the house, and she wouldn't make it that far. The conversation with Jen happened. A friend of ours tripped going up the stairs in her home and broke her wrist that morning. Her husband was out of town at the time, and she needed someone to drive her to the ER, so I went with her. Mike added me as a third to the text conversation, so while I was there, I just wasn't able to be active on it. I caught up to it when it was basically over while I was in the waiting room. Mike opened by just wanting to understand if there was some kind of misunderstanding and the rumor mill at work, and noted the confusion that it was causing. I really thought Jen would object to my being in the conversation, but she didn't bring it up and feigned concern about the stress that was being created by these rumors. He pointed out that two separate people both noted that she had lodged complaints about being excluded from the pre-wedding celebrations, and also that she had been invited to our wedding to them. Jen denied it all at first. She insisted that she had not spoken to at least one of them at all, and that whatever she had said to the other was probably a misunderstanding. Her version of things was that she understood that she hadn't been invited to our wedding and assumed her exclusion was based on expense. She also said she didn't expect to actually be invited to any pre-wedding events because it would be weird, in her opinion, to have a girl present at an all-male bachelor party because she assumed that it would be an event involving a strip club or related sex work. As an aside, Mike's actual stag party is a board game night, because that's one of the hobbies that gives him a lot of joy, and he's sex positive, but strip clubs aren't his thing. But he didn't get into any of that. Instead, he just responded that he chose an activity that he liked doing, it had nothing to do with sex workers or invitee gender, and he was intentionally keeping it small. Mike's response to the wedding invite denial was to show her screenshot of conversations with the people who brought this to our attention. They had given full permission to share that with her. Jen's tone immediately shifted, and she started insisting on moving to video chat. Mike didn't want to do that and declined. She kept on denying what she had said at that point, insisted those folks were lying to us and causing drama, and was getting increasingly upset. All caps typing and a lot of exclamation marks being used. That there were people in our social group who never let her move on from the past and were out to get her. Mike responded that he was sorry if that was the case. He didn't hold those sentiments. He wasn't even around when all of that went down, but wanted to emphasize 2 points. 1, he wanted to make it absolutely clear and certain that an invitation to the wedding was not on the table, and 2, while he considered them friendly, his takeaway from their interactions was that she was interested in him in a way that he was not going to reciprocate, and if he had somehow misread her intentions there was at least a desire for a friendship that he didn't feel was appropriate to pursue with her, because much of what she wanted to talk about, as a friend, was too inappropriate and awkward, given that he doesn't really know her and she's engaged, and she has a long-term partner. At that point, she kept reiterating how no one will ever let her move on from 10 years ago, and she was really upset that no one will recognize her efforts at changing or growth, and that the wider social group went out of their way to bully people who are neurodivergent. She didn't provide a response or apology for making things uncomfortable and awkward around the flirting attempts. He started to tell her that it was probably a good idea to end this conversation since it didn't seem like they were going to resolve this, but she beat him to it by blocking him. A few days later, Mike got a few messages from her partner, who was upset and concerned that Jen, based on what he was hearing, was being attacked and bullied by us because of her checkered past in the group. Honestly, the guy was just trying to defend her, which I get, and he wasn't around for those events, so I don't know what Jen has told him happened, but I generally assume by the messages he sent that Jen has misrepresented the past to him as well. Mike thanked him for reaching out, said he understood that he was acting protectively towards Jen, and asking him what the partner understood about everything. The partner repeated a version of what Jen had told people, that her good friend Mike was being a bad friend by excluding her and allowing other people in the group to bully her by proxy about being autistic and past behavior, and that we had abruptly uninvited her because I had decided that she was a threat and I was jealous of her. Mike set him as straight as he could by explaining that he never considered Jen a close friend. Friendly at best, and that he wasn't even around for everything that happened years ago, so whatever opinions he had of Jen were his own and not entirely informed by the past. He also made it clear that Jen had never been invited to the wedding in the first place and had let her know that. He also shared that Jen had been inappropriate in her communication with him with what he took as overt attempts to flirt with him, including text and flirty emojis and asking him to meet up one-on-one. He offered to share those messages with him. Jen's partner asked to see some of it, and Mike shared probably the more obviously blatant stuff. The partner didn't really say much after that, just thanked Mike for what he shared, and the conversation just kinda died. We haven't heard from him since, but my guess is that our version of events really didn't match hers, and the jig was kind of up. Jen has made some vague posts on social media about being betrayed and misunderstood, but Mike didn't take the bait on any of it and hasn't responded. He hasn't blocked her on Instagram because he wants to keep tabs on things for a bit, but she's mostly back to her usual content: selfies. About a month later, we ended up running into her at a birthday party. She didn't really say anything to either of us, but didn't look happy to see us. We kept our distance, and we kept it cordial. No drama resulted, no word on her partner. All I know is he didn't come with her that night, and we weren't going to ask. Additional information. What happened 10 years ago? OP says, for some backstory, otherwise it's confusing, a woman in our social circles started dating this guy. I'll call him Dean. They date for almost a year. She gets a job out of state, and they decide they don't want to do long distance, so she moves and they break up. Dean, in the meantime, has made his own friendships with a bunch of people and is now considered a part of the group. A little while later, he meets Jen at a bar and they start dating, and she makes friends, and then also becomes a part of this larger social circle. Dean is in the military, and he gets assigned overseas. Jen and Dean try to make it work for a little while, but long distance is too hard, and they break up. Jen stays local and friends with people. So that's the backstory. After the breakup, there's a girls' trip where people get pretty drunk, and the conversation turns to the weirder things that they're all into in bed. When it's Jen's turn, she admits that she and Dean had a thing where they'd pick up another woman at a bar, or whatever, and then Jen would hook up with this woman while Dean watched them. I guess Dean would leave the room or whatever and pretend to go to bed. They would never tell this woman what was really happening. I don't know how many times that had happened, but it was a few according to Jen. This does not go over well. A few of the women would get angry and tell Jen how incredibly fucked up this is. Jen is like, totally surprised that people are mad at her and doesn't understand that this is really gross, fucked up behavior. It's a huge deal. A bunch of people stop speaking to Jen, and she's effectively pushed out of the social group. She's very upset, very apologetic, but doesn't understand why this is gross and terrible. Finally, a couple people basically told her that if she wants any hope of trying to salvage some of this, she needs to get into therapy and understand why this is so fucked up. She allegedly went and allegedly seemed to get it, improve, make amends, etc., which is why a few people in the group still invite her to stuff. I guess in that process, that's how she was diagnosed as having autism. But there are definitely other people in this group who don't see her working on herself as contingent as anything. That it's good she did it, but it doesn't change what happened, and they didn't want to be friends. I would say that no one is out and out mean or rude to her these days. She just doesn't get invited to things, and people are cordial, but standoffish. I think there was a general assumption that she'd get the hint and stop showing up to things, even if she was invited by people more willing to look past all this. She's still pretty hurt that some people won't look past this. I wasn't living here when all this happened, and I didn't know anyone involved. I wouldn't be likely to look past it either. In the comments, Kelderson says, so Jen got in trouble with the group for not understanding boundaries and consent, and got herself in trouble again because of not understanding boundaries and consent, but can't understand why people dislike her. Yeah, no growth has happened. It's almost like there's a pattern here. Sometimes I wish I had a wider social circle, but then I come here and read all about friend group drama, and I feel content. I used to have a wider college-adjacent group, and there was definitely a point that I realized I was only friends with some of these people due to proximity rather than actual connection, some of which were just drama-filled or awful. Friend group is a lot smaller these days, and honestly, a lot better for my mental health. Yeah, and I guess my 2 cents on that is that I see a lot of people these days complaining about not having friends in their life or not having bigger social friend groups. But to me, those also feel like the same kinds of people that when there are big, dramatic blow-ups, whether they are involved or not, they're also the first ones to cut a friend group off and be like, man, my life is so much better drama-free. And then it just happens enough times that they are completely isolated from any social groups, and they're like, damn, I protected my peace so much that I am completely alone now. I'm not liking this social isolation. It's obviously not the same for Jen, because Jen has now on multiple occasions not cared about consent or other people's boundaries, and she has earned the social isolation that she is facing. I don't think that she has or will learn her lesson past this point, and her having autism has nothing to do with her inability to understand boundaries. It's not an excuse. She sounds like a terrible person that refuses to learn and will not change. I don't blame OP and anyone else that doesn't want to associate with her. She's had her chances. She's shown that she's unwilling to be a better person. At that point, you just have to cut people like her out of your lives for good. Let them go have their growth and character development somewhere else, because I don't have the patience or the time for them. Thank you for the story, and thank you for the update, OP. I hope you continue to keep her out of your life. She does not sound like a very pleasant person. Our next post is by an anonymous account, and it's titled, I'm getting my arm amputated tomorrow, and I'm excited about it. Anonymous instead of my regular account because of medical and family stuff. I was born with amniotic band syndrome on my arm. Amniotic band syndrome occurs when the lining of the amniotic sac is damaged during pregnancy. This creates string-like strands of tissue in which the fetus gets tangled. These strands, called amniotic bands, may wrap around different parts of the developing body. This cuts off or constricts blood flow and keeps the baby from growing normally. The constricted blood flow causes a wide range of birth defects. My arm is dead weight. I can't move it, and the entire thing is either numb or has nerve pain. When I was little, I begged my parents to get my arm removed. It hurts so bad sometimes, but they always said no, and my grandparents and my aunt agreed with my parents. Even my younger sister does now. They don't know what it's like to have a limb that I can't use and only causes me pain. I was forced to wear long sleeves all the time so that my arm would look normal. As soon as I turned 18, I went to the doctor to see about an amputation. It sounds extreme, but this is actually a common thing for amniotic band syndrome. Me asking for it isn't some out there request, and the doctors agreed with me. Anyways, I'm sure my friends are tired of hearing about how excited I am, even though they would never say that. So I'm getting off my chest that I am so excited for tomorrow, and I can't wait to be rid of my useless and painful arm. I have never wanted anything more in my life. I'm 18, and my family can't stop me now. In the comments, to a downvoted comment about no one being at fault, including the parents, OP says, I have been in pain my whole life. My family ignored any doctor who recommended amputation, even though it was not an extreme solution for amniotic band syndrome. I have never been able to do things like have a job, play sports, or even finish high school because of the nerve pain. Like I said in my post, my parents refused to do anything, no matter how much I begged, and forced me to pretend my useless arm was normal. Sorry for sounding like that, but I hold them completely at fault. On phantom pain, OP says, I will take phantom pain over an arm that I can't move or use at all. My doctor and the surgeon went over this with me, and I'm prepared for that. Uncle Yimbo says, congratulations. You're the one who has to live with a non-functioning arm, or live without it, and you've had a very long time to make up your mind. This is your decision, and other people will just have to get the fuck over it if they don't like it. Tell anyone who says something negative about the decision that you had the doctor save the arm and they can have it attached to them if they like it so much. Exactly. A bit selfish of his family to not let him have it amputated sooner. I don't know. It is a big decision. I could see asking him to wait until 18. Maybe new innovations could help in another way. I'm very happy for OP though. At this point, I'm sure it's well thought out. I disagree. My sister's arm was broken at birth, and nerve damage, etc. meant that it was useless. She had well over 15 operations on it to try to help. Physio her whole life, etc. Nothing worked. She so desperately wanted it removed because it caused mass amounts of pain. I know if she was still alive, she would have it chopped off. She was saying as young as 8 years old that she wanted it gone. It's society who is like, oh, but think of how you'll look, not taking into account the amount of pain she was in. This young person deserves people who support their decision and nothing less. I completely agree with that. I think a lot of people are let down when it comes to medical decisions like this. And it's not like when we find cases of doctors refusing to do things in this capacity that the doctors don't have a point. Sometimes it's really a rock and a hard place situation where the doctors make a good point, there are grey areas of legality around it, but OP themselves or the person wanting to get something amputated or some big medical decision made is in an intense amount of pain, an unnecessary amount of pain, and it's like an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. But if I were OP's parents in this case, I would be advocating for them non-stop to get their arm amputated, because at the end of the day, it's about what they want. It's about what's going to make their quality of life better. And I think if I weren't able to get that in my country, I would do my best to get together resources to have it done in another country that would facilitate an operation like that. To me, it kind of feels like OP's community has let them down and let them suffer for 18 years. If I were in their shoes, I don't know how I would go about maintaining those relationships, knowing they let me suffer for so long. And now, onto the update. It's 3 years later, they kind of just go on about the initial story. I'm going to read it anyway, skip ahead if you don't want to hear it again. I, 21 female, was born with amniotic band syndrome. My arm was affected. I couldn't move or lift my arm as it was dead weight. The amniotic band syndrome meant that my arm didn't develop correctly, so it was like having a dead weight, unusable arm hanging at my side like a normal arm does. My arm hung differently. I couldn't move it or use it at all. The only feeling I had from it was either numbness or pain. Imagine having an arm hanging from your shoulder and chest that was dead weight, where you could feel the heaviness, but couldn't lift it or move it or use it like a normal arm, and the only feeling you got from it was either pain or being numb, and you couldn't untwist it into a more comfortable or natural position. That was me. My parents refused to have my arm amputated, even though that was a normal thing for children with amniotic band syndrome, and doctors recommended it. I always had to wear long sleeves, and I had to act like my arm was normal. I know now that my parents are the kind of people who act like they are special and important for having a disabled child, but they only acted like that in front of others. Meanwhile, I had to hide it and pretend that I had a normal arm. Doctors told my parents I was in pain. It was obvious before I could even talk. There was no reason for that. My parents are educated. They aren't religious, and they believe in science, but they never listen to any doctors. I spent my entire life in pain. I didn't finish school. I left before I was 18 because of the pain. I never ever slept enough. I couldn't ever have a job. I couldn't do stuff that other kids did. I don't talk to my family anymore because of it. As soon as I turned 18, I went to see a doctor by myself without my parents. The doctor agreed that my arm should have been amputated when I was a baby. I was sent to a specialist, and there was no disagreement about doing amputation surgery. All of the medical professionals who were involved said they had never seen an adult in my situation before because the surgery is done on babies and sometimes young children. My parents, my siblings, and all the rest of the relatives tried to talk me out of the surgery, but like I said, I don't talk to them anymore. It will be 3 years in October since I had my arm amputated. I had what's called a shoulder disarticulation, and I have no regrets at all. I had the odd phantom ache or twinge right after the surgery, but that went away shortly afterwards, and those aches and twinges were nothing compared to the pain that I had my whole life. I'm still amazed at what it's like to have a life with no pain. After the surgery, I had to learn to walk and balance again since the weight of my arm was missing, but now I'm able to do everything that I couldn't do before. I got a part-time job after the surgery, and now I have a full-time with my provincial government. I went back to finish school, and now in September, I'm starting university part-time at night. I can't go full-time during the day because I need to work full-time. It'll take me longer to earn my degree, but I'm still going to do it. I want to be an accountant. I don't regret having the surgery. I'm fine only having one arm. The one thing that's a bit annoying is having to take shirts and tops to a tailor to get the entire sleeve removed, because if I don't go to the tailor, the fabric from the unused sleeve gets in the way. But that isn't a big deal compared to what having my arm was like. I know you shouldn't hate people, but I hate my family for denying me a life like this. I went to therapy after I got my full-time job to work on this, but I still hate them some days. I forgot that I posted here until a while ago, but I wanted to post one more time because most people left kind comments or sent kind messages after my last post. Almost all of them were nice. I don't regret getting my arm amputated, and I would rather only have one arm if it meant not having dead weight for an arm and pain. I don't care if anyone thinks I'm wrong about my arm. I'll only have one arm for the rest of my life, but I don't regret getting rid of my useless arm. In the comments, most Canadian provinces, such as Ontario, have a mature minor doctrine, where minors under 18 can consent to medical procedures without their parents' permission. They need to be of sound mind and mature enough to know the situation and potential issues that may arise. But it's perfectly legal. I know it doesn't help OP, but they could have approached a doctor earlier and most likely have gotten it done sooner, as it sounded like they would have been mature enough to qualify. OP replies, "No. You think I didn't try that? Respectfully, you have no idea what I did or didn't do. I begged my parents and doctors for amputation surgery my entire life. Even when I got older, every single doctor I went to said they couldn't do it without the consent of my parents. I even tried talking to a lawyer one time. It was hard to find one since I didn't have any money, but even he said if I wasn't an adult, my parents had the final say. Doctors and a lawyer said there was no way under any law or policy, even if the doctors disagreed with my parents. Don't you think if I could have done it sooner I would have? I've wanted this since I was old enough to understand what pain is. I would have given anything to have the surgery. I would have actually sold my soul if it was possible. You have no idea how much I tried. Don't just casually say that I could have done it sooner. It's easy to say that from in front of your screen or keyboard, but you have no idea what it was like for me. Stop acting like it was that easy. I'm proof it wasn't." Further in the comments, Coming in the Nile says, "Why on earth would any parent force their child to live like that? There's a reason that amputations for that condition are usually performed at birth." Unfortunately, the answer is ableism. They would rather have a suffering kid who can fill out 2 shirt sleeves than a thriving but visibly different kid. If the arm is non-functional, it's not different than having a prosthetic. Like, you have to be a sick individual to put someone through so much pain and suffering. The denial is strong. Having the surgery means admitting that your child was born with a defect, which means clearly you did something wrong. The wearing long sleeves thing definitely lends to the more important to keep up appearances thing. But I do agree that choosing to put your child through that to soothe your own ego is pretty fucked up. I'm not so sure that it's an aversion to surgery, it's the lack of their child being whole, despite the twisted manifestation. I can only speak from one instance, but in that case, the parents put their child through many, painful, and ultimately ineffective surgeries over the course of 15 years. This friend, now an adult, was born without the smaller lower leg bone and only half a foot. The parents were strongly encouraged to amputate at birth, and encouraged throughout. It's what my friend wanted. But the parents just could not stand the idea of their child not being whole. To them, even a barely functional leg was better than a functional prosthetic. So they forced them to go through a ton of surgeries and have a permanent limp, instead of one surgery and some prosthetic fittings. I think it's good to read these stories of people putting their children through unnecessary suffering so that if we see examples of it in our daily lives, we can go put pressure on those parents for letting their children down, for allowing unnecessary suffering where there is an easier solution to these problems. I know not all instances of surgery are important or necessary for children, but I would hope that things like this child having an amputation for their foot or leg that was born without a bone and would be an obvious quality of life difference would be something that you do go pressure those parents about. OP's case, the arm is non-functioning. The arm is causing them an immense amount of pain. The previous cases mentioned in the first part of this post, where the commenter says, if their friend was still alive, they would have had that surgery because they were in an immense amount of pain. That is so sad. What happened to that child? Like, did they take their own life? It wouldn't have surprised me if OP took their own life before they turned 18 in this instance, because to me it sounds like their entire support group was not supporting them, and in fact they were enabling torture, really, allowing a child to live a tortured and painful existence. People take their lives for less. I myself am so proud of OP for sticking it through, for cutting everyone out of their life after they got the surgery, for recognizing that their community sucked and their community failed them. Thank you for coming back and sharing an update, OP. I wish nothing but the best for you going forward. Anyway, guys, that's where I'm going to end today's episode. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.